The colony burned with a kind of silence that mocked the screams beneath it. Fire rose from shattered towers, smoke coiling into the sky like blackened fingers clawing at a heaven that had long since turned its face away. The alien armada hung above the ruins, silver hulls glinting with the indifference of a predator fattened by routine slaughter. To the commander on the flagship, it was nothing more than another raid on a string of conquests so monotonous they blurred together. He sat in his chair with the relaxed poise of someone too secure in superiority to feign urgency. A hologram of the battlefield flickered before him, little red dots, human ships, snuffed out one by one. Efficient, he murmured, though the word was not praise. It was the sigh of a man checking another box on an endless ledger. His officers laughed when the last resistance vessel detonated. One of them compared the battle to hunting vermin in a grain store. Another offered a bet on how quickly the ground forces would clear the remaining stragglers. Their commander accepted neither comment nor wager. The outcome was already certain, and certainty bored him. On the planet's surface, streets were choked with ash and desperation. The aliens moved methodically through the wreckage, their armor gleaming as if even soot dared not cling to it. They herded survivors into makeshift pens, marking each prisoner with the efficiency of farmers branding cattle. Fear thickened the air, but among the trembling crowd, one figure refused to bend. She sat with her back straight, wrists bound, face streaked with blood but not broken. When they brought her before the alien commander, the mood in the chamber sharpened. He had demanded a human soldier, someone who had tasted battle. Instead, they offered him a woman with scars crossing her skin in jagged lines, old and new, each one etched by fire, blade, or bullet. She bore them like ornaments rather than wounds. He studied her as one might study an insect pinned to glass. "You," he said, voice calm as polished steel. "Your body carries the history of your people's feudal wars. Tell me every scar. Name them all, so we may understand the depths of your weakness." His officers chuckled, some leaning forward as if expecting a performance of humiliation. The silence stretched as she raised her head, eyes clear despite the blood drying on her temple. Then her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite defiance, something sharper. "Alphabetically," she asked softly, "or chronologically?" The laughter stopped. For a moment, the chamber seemed to shrink, as though the weight of her words displaced the air. One officer barked a laugh too late, forcing it through unease. The commander's expression didn't change, but his gaze lingered longer than before, like a man staring at a puzzle piece that didn't fit. He dismissed the moment with a flick of his hand, but the echo of her reply settled in the back of his mind like a splinter. Later, as the prisoners were processed, she remained vivid in his thoughts. He had interrogated hundreds, perhaps thousands, over years of conquest, and nearly all had broken. Cries, pleas, bargains whispered through cracked lips. Yet this one refused to give him the satisfaction of fragility. He considered asking again, pressing her until she caved, but the notion soured in his mouth. Something in her restraint unnerved him, though he would not admit it aloud. Reports poured in of the colony's full collapse. Infrastructure gone, resistance extinguished, survivors minimal. His officers congratulated themselves, drafting new plans with casual arrogance. Their next target was obvious, they argued. Earth, humanity's homeworld. Strike it, and the species' spirit would crumble entirely. The commander listened, nodding when expected, though part of him drifted back to the woman's eyes, calm, calculating, not desperate. He remembered how she hadn't even flinched when a guard shoved her to her knees. Earth, one officer declared proudly. A symbolic kill. Once their nest is broken, the rest will scatter. The commander approved the order with a gesture. Fleet trajectories shifted, engines roared to life, and 1,000 warships cut through the stars toward humanity's cradle. From orbit, Earth appeared deceptively vulnerable. Oceans gleaming, cities sprawling like anthills, skies unscarred by war. To the invaders, it looked almost inviting in its fragility. And yet, when human transmissions reached the flagship, They were not the panicked pleas expected of prey cornered at last. They were brief, clipped, spoken with a strange serenity. No desperation, no bargaining, only measured tones that acknowledged the invasion as if it had been anticipated. The words prickled along the commander's skin, but he dismissed the unease before his crew could notice. Prey sometimes pretended bravery before the kill. Still, he could not shake the image of the prisoner, her voice steady as she invited him to choose the order in which she catalogued her scars. It was not defiance in the simple sense. It was a message he could not yet decipher. When he finally turned away from the stars glimmering beyond the viewport, his reflection stared back at him, eyes narrowed, jaw tense. For the first time in countless campaigns, he felt the faintest edge of anticipation instead of boredom. Behind him, his fleet surged onward. Ahead lay Earth, a world he believed would fall like all the others. Yet in the quiet corridors of his mind, a question lingered. Had he mistaken the silence for weakness, when it might have been something else entirely? The invasion moved forward regardless, but the game had already shifted, though none of his officers knew it yet. Only the woman with the scars had given him warning, hidden inside a single, impossible question. The fleet descended on Earth with the confidence of predators who had never met prey capable of striking back. Thousands of alien ships slipped into orbit, their formation so precise it resembled a net cast across the void. Weapons charged, ready to erase continents in moments. On the bridge of the flagship, the commander leaned forward in his chair, expression impassive. Yet beneath that mask, a faint irritation grew, an echo of the unease he had carried since the scarred woman's remark. The first volleys should have burned oceans, toppled cities, broken the back of humanity's resistance before it even formed. Instead, the beams scattered like water striking glass. Whole barges of plasma sputtered out against an invisible barrier. Shock rippled through the officers. Technicians swarmed over consoles, their voices cracking as they reported unknown interference, localized distortion fields, unexplained dispersal. The commander's jaw tightened. Weapons did not simply fail. Someone had designed this. Below, Earth did not panic. Cities kept their lights. Civilian transmissions remained routine, air traffic, weather reports, even music drifting across frequencies the aliens monitored. The calm unsettled the crew more than weapons malfunctions could. Fearless prey was a contradiction. The commander snapped orders, demanding deeper scans. But every sensor pulse returned scrambled, as though the very planet bent observation back upon itself. Then a voice broke through the static. It was not frantic, not pleading. Clear, precise, spoken with the cadence of someone issuing instructions in a boardroom rather than a battlefield. This is Earth Defense Command. Your weapons are disabled. Further hostilities will not be tolerated. Withdraw immediately. The silence afterward was heavier than any explosion. Officers looked at one another, eyes wide. Some laughed too quickly, insisting it was bluff, a desperate attempt to buy time. The commander knew better. Bluffing sounded different. He had interrogated enough prisoners to recognize fear when it lingered under the surface of words. This voice had none. He ordered another strike. Dozens of ships fired in unison, their beams converging into a blinding lattice of energy. Again, the fire vanished into nothing. And then, without warning, the alien flagship's targeting systems went dark. One by one, lights across the control panels flickered out. The crew scrambled to compensate, voices rising in panic. The commander stood, forcing calm into his tone. Report. We've lost targeting arrays. Backup systems are offline. Something is overriding. The officer broke off, staring at his screen. It's not damage. It's being shut down remotely. The commander turned toward the viewport. Beyond it, a human fleet was emerging from the dark. They did not arrive in predictable arcs or sluggish jumps. They slipped through space itself, appearing as though the void had chosen to release them only at this moment. Sleek vessels, smaller than alien dreadnoughts but sharp in design, bristling with technology none of his analysts had ever catalogued. They didn't announce themselves with bravado. They simply took position, a wall of quiet resolve between Earth and its would-be conquerors. A channel opened without request. The same calm voice filled the commander's bridge. Your campaign has ended. You mistook our colonies for weakness. They were decoys placed for you to find. Every loss you celebrated, we permitted. Every victory you claimed, we counted toward this moment. Shock rippled through the bridge crew. One officer slammed a fist against his console. Lies. They couldn't have known. They couldn't. The commander silenced him with a gesture. He was watching the humans too closely to dismiss them now. Their formation was not arrogant. It was surgical. Each ship's placement covered another, weaving a net more efficient than his own fleet had ever managed. He realized, with a chill, that this was not improvisation. This was rehearsal, plans executed after years of preparation. Decoys, he muttered. The word tasted bitter. The colonies they had raised, the victories they had paraded, illusions. A species that had feigned fragility while sharpening its teeth. The human voice continued, still steady. We have no desire for conquest. But we are not prey. Leave now, and you may carry this lesson back to your people. Continue, and you will not survive. The commander's officers erupted in protest. Retreat was unthinkable. To leave would mean disgrace, perhaps execution at the hands of their own council. But he saw something in the human stillness that none of his subordinates could yet grasp. They did not need to threaten. Their confidence was absolute, born not from arrogance, but from certainty. He thought of the prisoner again, her scars carried like banners of history. Alphabetical or chronological. Each mark a lesson catalogued. Each war survived, not forgotten. Test them, one officer urged. They're bluffing. The commander hesitated, then nodded. A smaller cruiser advanced, charging its main gun. The human ships did not move. When the cruiser fired, the beam dissolved. In response, a single human vessel pulsed with light. An instant later, the cruiser was adrift. Engines offline, weapons cold, crew alive but helpless. Not destroyed. Disabled. It was worse than destruction, for it proved control so precise it bordered on contempt. Whispers filled the bridge. Fear, disbelief, confusion. The commander silenced them all with a single look. His thoughts churned faster than he allowed his body to show. Humanity had hidden for so long, endured humiliation and slaughter, all for this revelation. Their patience was not weakness. It was a weapon sharpened beyond anything his people understood. Stand down, he ordered finally, his voice low, each word deliberate. Gasps erupted from his officers, but none dared openly defy him. He was not surrendering, not yet. But he would not throw his fleet into a battle already lost. On the viewport, the human ships remained motionless, a silent verdict cast across the stars. For the first time in his long career of conquest, the commander felt the slow creep of fear coil through him. These were not vermin. These were predators who had waited for the right moment to bare their teeth. He turned away from the sight, but the weight of it followed him, heavy as gravity. In silence, he considered what came next. He could not admit it aloud, not yet, but the truth gnawed at him. This war had already changed, and he no longer held the high ground. The humans had spoken once, calmly. They would not need to repeat themselves. The admiral sat alone in his quarters, lights dimmed, the hum of the ship's systems sounding louder than usual, as if mocking him. He summoned archives stolen from human networks, footage long dismissed as primitive savagery. Grainy images flickered across the display, men clawing through mud-filled trenches while artillery carved the earth into shrapnel, cities flattened beneath bombs yet rebuilt within years, firestorms consuming entire populations who still emerged from ashes to fight again. Then came images sharper, closer to his era. Mushroom clouds blooming with terrible beauty, test footage of nuclear detonations where soldiers watched from behind tinted goggles. Not victory, not despair, study. They had studied their own annihilation. He watched a sequence of wars spanning centuries, each more brutal than the last, each scar becoming a foundation for the next. Humanity had not avoided conflict. It had drunk it like water, each generation fed by the pain of the one before. The admiral leaned forward, breath shallow. His people fought wars as predators fed, decisive, clean, overwhelming. The humans fought wars as if each loss were a whetstone sharpening their blade. Every defeat taught them how to endure. Every scar was a scripture. For the first time in decades, his hands trembled. He had mocked the prisoner's words, her offer to list her scars alphabetically or chronologically. Now the meaning struck him with clarity. Each wound was a record, a lesson, a story of survival against odds no empire could manufacture. The question had not been defiance. It had been history condensed into a challenge he had failed to recognize. When his officers entered, he shut the footage down, unwilling to let them glimpse his unease. They carried reports, whispers of discontent rippling through the fleet. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of human calm, of invisible weapons, of colonies sacrificed as bait. The admiral dismissed them with sharp orders, but he knew fear when it spread like infection. Later, in the grand chamber of the High Council, the debate grew vicious. Holograms of leaders surrounded him, their forms magnified and imposing, voices raised like clashing swords. "They are nothing," one elder snarled. "A primitive species wrapped in parlor tricks. Break them now before they gain momentum." Another countered, voice tight with dread. "We struck their heart world and found it waiting. You call that primitive?" The admiral spoke, his tone restrained but firm. "We miscalculated. Their weakness was a facade. The colonies we destroyed were decoys. Their true strength has been hidden, cultivated in silence. They are not prey. They are hunters biding their time." His words met with derision. Some scoffed, others accused him of cowardice. One counselor spat. "You would have us bow to insects who crawl in the dirt of a single world?" "No," the admiral answered coldly. "I would have us acknowledge that insects do not build machines that silence entire fleets without firing a shot." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Half the council demanded escalation, insisting the empire's might could not be questioned by an upstart species. The other half pressed for caution, whispering of omens, of hubris punished across history. The admiral stood at the center, watching the fracture widen. He understood the danger more clearly than any of them. It was not just the humans that threatened them, but the arrogance within their own empire. That night, alone once more, he returned to the footage. He studied battles where humans fought with nothing but sharpened sticks, holding lines against enemies far stronger. He watched uprisings where they endured starvation, torture, annihilation, yet rose again. There was no pattern of submission, no culture of surrender. They bled, learned, adapted. Where other species fractured, they endured. Where others sought peace through avoidance, they sought peace only through surviving war. He began to understand what his council refused to see. Humanity's calm was not bravado. It was inevitability. They did not rush to strike because they did not need to. Time itself had armed them, and patience was their greatest weapon. When he met with his officers again, he read the fear in their faces. Some still clung to denial, speaking of reinforcements, strategies, overwhelming numbers. Others remained silent, the weight of unspoken dread heavy on their tongues. He broke the silence. "You have seen their ships. You have heard their voice. You know the truth." One younger officer, voice unsteady, whispered, "If they are as you say, then we cannot defeat them." The admiral did not answer. The truth hung between them, undeniable yet unspeakable. To admit it fully would unravel the empire's identity. He dismissed them with orders to maintain position, though the words felt hollow. Their empire thrived on conquest, on certainty. Against humanity, certainty had evaporated. Far beyond the admiral's chamber, Earth remained quiet. Human fleets did not press their advantage. They waited, silent in orbit, watching, patient as stone. That patience terrified him more than any weapon could. Aggression was predictable. Calmness was strategy. As he lay in his chamber, eyes fixed on the ceiling, he realized the central conflict had shifted. It was no longer empire against colony, predator against prey. It was arrogance against endurance, hubris against history. His people could not yet see it, but he knew the humans had already won something far greater than a battle. They had claimed fear itself, planting it deep inside the heart of their enemies. The admiral closed his eyes and saw the prisoner once more. Not her scars, not her chains, but her question. Alphabetically or chronologically. He now knew what she had truly offered, a warning disguised as defiance, a ledger of every mistake made by those who underestimated her kind. And he understood, with a weight that pressed like iron against his chest, that soon he would be forced to choose whether to speak that truth to his people or watch them crumble under its silence. The stars bloomed with fire as the war began in earnest. From a dozen wormholes, human fleets emerged in silence, each formation unfolding with mathematical precision. They did not roar their arrival, nor waste energy in gestures of intimidation. They simply appeared, poised like blades drawn halfway from their sheaths, every movement exact, every position deliberate. The alien empire had prepared for an invasion of brute force. What they faced instead was something far colder, an opponent who treated war not as theater, but as inevitability. The admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching entire sectors of the sky fall into human control. Orders shouted by his officers dissolved into chaos as reports arrived. Strike groups disabled before firing a shot, supply lines severed by raiders appearing and vanishing through holes in space, dreadnoughts rendered inert by precise bursts of energy that cut them open without spilling a single drop of blood. The humans did not fight to impress. They fought to end. He tried to adapt, hurling fleets into counterformations, but each move collapsed against an enemy who had anticipated it long before the battle began. His people fought for glory, for domination. The humans fought as survivors who had already lost everything once and would never allow it again. Their efficiency was chilling, their silence unbearable. Not once did they crow or mock. Not once did they strike in anger. Every action was measured, as though they carried no hatred at all, only a terrible resolve. The admiral's crew looked to him for direction, eyes wide, voices cracking. He gave commands, sharp and precise, but he could feel their faith fraying. Each failure deepened the fissure running through their empire's heart. In desperation, he ordered a full assault, a concentrated push meant to overwhelm through sheer numbers. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. Alien ships surged forward, weapons blazing. But then the void shifted. Human vessels vanished, only to reappear behind enemy lines, cutting throats in silence. The assault collapsed in minutes. On another channel, intercepted transmissions revealed fragments of human coordination. Not boasts, not oaths of vengeance, simply calm acknowledgments. Target neutralized. Sector cleared. Proceed to Phase 2. Their voices carried no triumph, only the steady cadence of those who had rehearsed victory until it became second nature. The admiral felt his chest tighten. They were not improvising. They were executing a plan older than this war. The empire's lines disintegrated. Reports flooded in of governors declaring independence, of colonies rioting against imperial garrisons, emboldened by whispers of human victory. Even before the fleets collapsed, the empire itself was beginning to rot from within. Fear spread faster than any enemy fleet, corroding loyalty, unraveling chains of command. His people had believed themselves eternal. Now they fractured like glass struck by a hammer. On the bridge, an officer turned to him, voice trembling. "Admiral, what do we do?" He looked into the young soldier's eyes and saw the truth reflected there. Terror, disbelief, the first taste of mortality. For years, they had believed no force could challenge them. Now they faced not just defeat, but something worse, the realization that they had been wrong all along. The admiral drew a slow breath. "We survive," he said, though he knew survival no longer meant what it once had. A shadow moved across the viewport. A single human flagship drifted into position, larger than the rest, its design austere, functional, without ornament. A channel opened unbidden, and the same calm voice that had warned them over Earth spoke once more. The war is over. You may resist, but resistance will cost only lives, not outcomes. Surrender, and live to rebuild what remains of your people. Continue, and you will leave nothing for them to inherit. The words cut through the bridge like a blade. Officers exchanged glances, some snarling, others pale with dread. The admiral alone stood unmoving, gaze fixed on the human vessel. He recognized the voice now, though he did not know the name. It carried the same weight as the prisoner's defiance, the same certainty carved from scars and memory. He lowered his head. The war was lost. His empire would not vanish in fire, but in silence, overtaken by a species that had mastered survival so completely it no longer needed to scream its victories. He felt shame, but also something colder, heavier, understanding. When the surrender was formalized, the humans did not celebrate. They dismantled weapons, stabilized infrastructure, and restored systems with the same quiet efficiency they had used to win. They did not revel in conquest, nor demand tribute. They claimed control without gloating, as though the outcome had never been in question. To the admiral, this restraint was more terrifying than slaughter. Mercy wielded without warmth was not kindness, it was power perfected. Later, when he was brought to meet the human leadership, he expected humiliation. Instead, he was offered a choice: serve as governor under human oversight, or act as a diplomat, a bridge between his people and their new order. It was not generosity. It was strategy. The humans understood that empires did not collapse cleanly. They decayed, and decay had to be managed. He accepted, because refusal would have been meaningless. Yet part of him knew he had been spared not for who he was, but for what he could represent, a reminder to his people of what had been lost. As he was escorted from the chamber, he saw her again, the prisoner. Her chains were gone, her scars unhidden. She regarded him with the same calm she had carried in captivity, eyes neither cruel nor forgiving. For a long moment, they held each other's gaze. Then she spoke, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the silence. We never wanted war, but when it comes, we remember. The admiral felt the words pierce deeper than any blade. He bowed his head, not in deference, but in acknowledgement. The galaxy had changed, and nothing he or his kind could do would alter that. Humanity had awakened, and their patience had ended. He returned to his quarters that night and stared out into the stars. Once, they had seemed like jewels waiting to be plucked. Now they looked like witnesses, distant and unblinking, watching as one empire crumbled and another quietly, inexorably, took its place. He thought of the scars etched across the prisoner's body, each a record of survival. He thought of his own people, so proud, so blind. And he wondered how long it would take for them to understand that humanity had not just defeated them. They had redefined the very nature of power. The war was over, but something far greater had begun. Humanity would not need to roar to claim the stars. They would simply walk forward, scar by scar, until the galaxy itself learned the question he had ignored too long: alphabetically or chronologically.